Hey, what's going on there, folks? Good afternoon, good morning to a few out there. It is the Earthmaster back here on this last day of April, April 30th, 2023. It is about 10:06 a.m. here on the West Coast in the state of California. And the latest earthquake shows a 4.5 down here off the coast of Mexico. Looks like around the Middle America Trench at about 60 kilometers or so. Let's go ahead and check out what's going on here across the map. As far as the rest of earthquake activity goes, still very active down into the Southern California area. And also, looks like we've had a little migration of the earthquake swarm closer to the southern end of the San Andreas Fault. Of course, if you've been following this little, I shouldn't say little, it's been actually a pretty significant earthquake swarm here over the last couple days. You'll see that, it definitely continued here overnight north of Mexicali, but now we have a new migration and a new earthquake swarm closer to the Salton Sea, very close to the Brawley seismic zone and just south here of the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. Now, I'm not for sure if this would be in triggering zone or not, as far as potential swarm triggering a big fault system up here, the plate boundary, such as the San Andreas Fault. I think it is. It's pretty close. No information here from Dr. Lucy Jones. In fact, the last update, and just in case you guys are wondering, she's like the face of earthquakes, so to speak. When it comes to big earthquakes in Southern California, she normally holds press conferences and try to explain what's going on. Her last explanation here of the earthquake swarms basically states that well, obviously we know what earthquake swarms are. They're small and moderate events without one big main shock. They continue until they stop. No clear pattern, usually for a day or two, but sometimes a week. Nothing new on this migration of earthquake activity further north here towards the southern end of the San Andreas Fault. Maybe she'll chime in, maybe she won't. Either way, I was kind of chatting about this yesterday here, that we need to watch for some further migration closer to the southern end here of the San Andreas Fault. Sure enough, overnight, kind of kicked up here in a big fashion with a 4.5 just after midnight and a 4.3. So again, I don't know, a lot of people will use a large quake and a swarm and then call the other events aftershocks, but in this type of scenario, I think these could be all foreshocks to something much bigger. It doesn't happen all the time, but this type of swarm here is something we haven't seen in a little while. We've seen swarms here in the Salton Sea. It's been about a year or so, maybe over a year and a half, since we've seen any type of swarming here near the Salton Sea in this manner. But far as seeing this type of pattern with a swarm starting down south, migrating closer to the north here, I just really haven't seen that in quite a while. So in this new swarm, when was I down here? I think it was 2021. I think it was early 2021. I went down here to investigate the last earthquake swarm down here. And man, that's, goodness, not a place I want to visit again, I don't think. But I'll try anything once, and that was my one time. But I probably don't plan on going down here. Either way, this is then the area that did see an earthquake swarm back in 2021 as well. So it looks like we got a total so far of 32 earthquakes in this swarm, following a 4.5 and a 4.3. These are the, it looks like it started off as some larger events, and then quite a few other microquakes. Let's see, it looks like there's another 4 in there. Let me go back here. Yeah, we got 2 4.3s. The largest a 4.5. Very shallow earthquake activity here, though. Roughly between 1 and 2 kilometers, it looks like, below the surface. Although we do have one that looks like it was about 5 or 6, 8 kilometers. There we go. That's a little bit further here to the west. So let's see what we got down south here with this swarm that we were watching yesterday. Overnight, looks like we got 54 earthquakes, but remember, that's not the total tally. We need to go back here a couple days ago when the storm started. It looks the swarm. No storms yet. I got got that on my mind though. So it looks like this swarm started on the 27th of April, just a couple days ago, and tallied up a total of 150 earthquakes within this vicinity of the Mexicali area. And the largest event is a 4.1, so a little bit larger activity happening further up north into the new swarm area, including a couple within the last hour. It looks like a 1.2 and a 1.8. So we notice when we're looking at this activity yesterday, we did notice a little separate swarm up further north on the San Jacinto Fault zone, which is going to be this area right here. Showed about 9 earthquakes or so in its own separate swarming fashion. And then overnight we got another one right here. And all this activity is moving up north. Well, you guys know what's up north, right? It's the San Andreas Fault, the southern end, where they expect an 8.1 earthquake. They, the seismologists, geologists, scientists, the professional folks in charge of everything. I can't really find too much information on this. The only earthquakes that really make the news are the ones that's being felt. But any type of earthquake activity in this type of fashion is noteworthy to bring up, considering it's sitting right next to a big sleeping giant, right? And it's all migrating northward towards it. The general plate movement here, of course, along with the North American and the Pacific plate, shows this direction here with the red arrows. I think we've studied this quite a bit in high school, and of course I studied this in college here more recently. Still studying it, actually. Geology is a never-ending study. But it looks as though, that pressure in some way is definitely gaining here with that northeast. What do we got here? North, not 100% here today. It's kind of cooked yesterday. Got a little bit too much sun. But the general northwest movement here of the Pacific plate and southeast of the North American plate here, adding quite a bit of strain specifically within this area of Southern California. Now, it's been a little while since we've had any major earthquake activity. Someone did note the 7.2 occurred back in 2010, and that is going to be a little bit further south of our swarm area. I did not stretch that far down south yesterday when I was looking at historical data, but it is there. It looks like it struck on the Laguna Fault, which is a little bit further south. I don't think it's associated with this fault system up north, although pretty close. There's a little bit of information here on it. We're not going to read it all, but I found that it would be in close relation to the Laguna Fault. That 2010 earthquake struck on the 7.2, pretty strong one. But aside from that earthquake, further down south on a separate fault, up here in the northern section here around the Imperial Fault, Brawley Seismic Zone, southern end of the San Jacinto Fault Zone has been very quiet here over the, last earthquake I think was back in 1987 here, specifically within this area. So quite a bit of time frame has passed since then. There was 7.3, 1892. But yeah, I'm obviously there's concern of some earthquake activity here on these other fault systems, but what's got me concerned most is the migration up here of the earthquake activity much closer here to the southern end of the San Andreas Fault. And that southern end is definitely capable of producing an 8.1, and it's been, what did they say, over 300 years. Now up here, there's a little section up further north. I guess we can bring that up here real quick. Let me revise this here. Go back here real quick. Let's modify the search just a little bit. I want to modify the rectangle here. Then again, this is only 6.0 and above, so it's going to show a lot of activity. I don't want to bring up this much activity here. I'm trying to cover a good portion of the San Andreas Fault, but we're going to go 6.5 so we don't get all the other earthquakes out there. Search this area. The San Andreas Fault earthquake here, the 7.5 back in 1812. This segment up here ruptures roughly between 150 to 200 years, I believe. Let me see. This is a little graph here with regards to the segments of the San Andreas Fault. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger so you guys can read that there. And I can read it too. Okay, this will work. So here is the Laguna Salada. Is that right? Hopefully, the fault that ruptured back in 2010. That was felt, pretty broadly over Southern California. And the southern end of the San Andreas Fault is this segment right here. This is the extreme southern end that ruptures between 200 and 300 years. So we haven't seen an earthquake here on the extreme southern end in over 300 years. But this segment right here, a little bit further up north of the Rancho Cucamonga area, ruptures between 150. Well, the last earthquake was back in 1812, so that's still over 200 years since that earthquake struck 7.5 back in 1812. And that's going to be roughly this area up here, 175 to 200 years they have. I've read 150 to 200, but still we're well over that 200 year mark for that 1812 earthquake. And then other segments up north here, looks like 100 to 150 year interval of larger earthquakes. So I would say, just looking at these models and intervals and stuff like that, I think we've been overdue for quite a while. They've been chatting about the southern end of the San Andreas Fault for quite a while. And, I think one of these times, something nearby, an earthquake swarm or maybe a moderate-sized earthquake within the vicinity of the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault could definitely trigger the big one down here, because it's about as wound tight as it can be. I've watched many videos, studied this, book after book, chart after chart. There's GPS measurements up here showing this thing as tight as can be. Some big names out there saying that this thing, all it would take is a little nudge and it could trigger and release all this stored up energy. And by the way, a lot of people think that maybe a 4 or a 3 will relieve stress, but coming from the face of the earthquake community right here, right after she mentioned the 4.1 and smaller events about the earthquake swarm, days prior to this, actually, small quakes do not relieve stress to prevent big ones. Straight from Dr. Lucy Jones. So that's just a myth that smaller quakes tend to prevent, the bigger one. That's inevitable. It's going to happen, right? So these little swarms and stuff like that are not relieving stress. A lot of people think that, but in a way, it's adding stress to the area. We've watched this migration of earthquake activity stretch up yesterday and past couple days northward in 2 separate areas. One to the west of the Salton Sea, which is on the Pacific plate, and one that's over here on the North American plate, opposite sides of the plate boundary. So that puts this bad boy right in key. Now, how much more is it going to take? I don't know. That's the question of the hour, the question of the year, maybe the question of our lifetime. Once this thing does hit, it's going to create a lot of damage down here in Southern Cal, and it's going to be a bad day, bad time for the folks down there in Southern California. Again, the last time the southern end here was back in I think around the time that the Cascadia struck up north back in 1700 or so. Not going to dig into that again, but it's been over 300 years. And then a little bit further up north here is when the 7.5 struck in 1812. And that was still a big one, 7.5. Intervals there, 175 to 200 years. It's been over 200 years. So the best thing anyone can do, if you guys live down there, I live up here north of this area in Chico, and we got the Cascadia we have to deal with. An 8.1. good possibility we would feel it up here. I remember feeling some of the seismic waves from the that big earthquake up in Alaska, the 8-pointer they had up here a couple days or year or so back. I think it was back in 2021, the year of the eights. We had like 3 8-pointers that year. But yeah, again, the best thing you guys can do is be prepared, stay safe, have an earthquake plan. Don't let this alter your daily lives, but it's best to be prepared. I look at realistic what's going on here. One earthquake swarm to another. Where's the next one? Is it going to be closer to the San Andreas Fault? Because according to the map here, we're within what, 10 miles or so just on this map here. This is what they draw. But the Brawley seismic zone extends here into the southern end of the San Andreas Fault. So it's really awfully close here in terms of geologically speaking. I wouldn't want to be out there in the summertime walking 10 miles. I couldn't even stand 5 minutes out there in the summertime. It was not good. Not only the heat, but everything else that's out there. Toxic smells in the air, very bad stuff. But so we're watching that with the 4.5 that struck in the Salton Sea area this morning. The Southern California Seismic Network put out their little event mode here and talking about aftershocks. But this isn't really a main quake with a bunch of aftershocks. This is a swarm fashion. So I don't like calling these quakes that are occurring all aftershocks. And then they use foreshocks as well. But historically, seismicity activity since the records began in 1932, they've had 77 events of 4.0 or greater within 10 kilometers of today's event. The largest historic event within this area of the 4.5, which is going to be right here in this area, was a 5.8 in 1945. Now, we didn't see that because I don't have 5-pointers pulled up here. I only have on this map, 6.5 and above. So a little bit of time has passed even since we've seen a 5.8 down there. 1945. The most recent historic event was the 4.0 back in August 2021. So I think that's when the last swarm was down there in this area. So yes, swarms are, they're common, but are they this common? Like far as this type of migration of 3 separate swarms migrating further north? That doesn't happen too often. Yes, we do have little swarms on occasion down here, little here, and they've never triggered the big one. But if we become complacent and, think, well, this swarm is not going to do anything, then it's going to catch us off guard when it does. I do think swarms can trigger or prelude large earthquakes around a major plate boundary where it's well overdue. I would, common sense tells me that. To ignore that fact is just to be a little on the ignorant side or blind. So be prepared, stay safe. We're covering it. I didn't get a chance to do an update last night because I was just cooked. I couldn't even move. I was outside in the pool and I didn't realize that I was getting a little bit too much sun yesterday. It was about 95 degrees yesterday. And it hit me really hard last night, so I crashed completely. I feel a little bit better. I'm staying out of the sun for a little while, but we do have some cooler weather here in California coming up. All right, let's look at the rest here of California and see what's going on, see if we got any other areas to watch. There has been a little bit of activity up here across the Garlock Fault shear zone that kind of runs completely opposite of the faults typical here in Southern California. This one kind of runs east to west or southwest to northeast direction. But I believe this here plays a major part too in building up some stress within this zone here of many different faults and plate and plate boundary here, right around the Fraser Park area. So there's a little bit of smaller microquake activity occurring within this zone right now. Up north, not a whole lot through the bay. Northern California, a little spotty. We did have one earthquake last night, back prior to the Cascadia subduction zone. This was early last night at 2.7, 10 kilometers deep. And the tremor map, by the way, yesterday still showed some movement, 144 epicenters of tremor. That's along the Cascadia subduction zone. Not volcanic tremor, but tremor in terms of a slow slip event detection there at the deeper levels of the Cascadia. I shouldn't say real deep, but 35 to 45 kilometers deep underneath this area. So a little bit of movement continuing there into the north and the southern end of the Cascadia. Further to the east, not a whole lot of activity. One earthquake here in New Mexico, 3.1. Could be in relation to what's going on down here. A lot of times we'll see some inland earthquake activity away from the plate boundary due to regional stress, which is obviously this area where the swarming is occurring. Oklahoma, not a whole lot going on. The eastern portion of the country as well. We did see a little bit of activity across Mexico and El Salvador. Let's see what we got going on there today. Mostly fours. Pretty good cluster of earthquake activity there in those regions. South America, 4.8 along the Peru-Chile Trench. Let's see what we got in Puerto Rico. Mostly smaller quakes, some 2s and 3s it looks like. Nothing going on out, well, we got one earthquake here in the Atlantic. Just been so used to saying nothing going on because it's been awfully quiet. A little 4.7 last night into the central mid-Atlantic ridge. But that looks like that's about it out there. Further east, looks like Turkey getting a little earthquake activity right now with a 3.3 into the cluster of earthquake activity. Also a 4 in there as well, but that's aftershock activity following the events here a month or so back. Down into the south, or let's see where this is at. All right, down into the Zimbabwe area. Looks like little 3.3, nothing major going on there at all. Let's see what we got over here. We got a pretty good amount of earthquake activity, and we're kind of watching some of this movement last night before bed. Very deep earthquake activity. Oops. Oh, this thing better not be messing up again. We did see a 4.6 just before midnight here, 601 kilometer deep into the looks like it's more so at the northern end of the Kermadec Trench, but either way, south of Fiji, in a region that does see quite a bit of deep activity. That is a pretty deep one. Well, you know, we get those way down there, we start to see adjustment further upstream. In this case, it looks like New Zealand seeing a little activity here along the plate boundary with a couple 3s. Let me go check out the New Zealand map. I did GeoNet quakes. I did remove the GeoNet servers from here just because of the huge clutter and the amount of time that some of those quakes stay up on the globe is I like to only keep 24 hours and above here on the globe. That way we don't get it too cluttered. Right now it's still a little bit beyond that point. Right about, somewhere around there. Okay. But yeah, removed GeoNet servers from here. The EMSC models will still pick up on some of the other earthquakes, but they will drop off after 24 hours. So let's go to the all magnitudes here over the last hour or so, mostly smaller microquakes. We did have a 3.0 here about an hour or so ago in that region that has been seeing a little elevated uptick here within the North Island, New Zealand area. It's going to be just over here. Close to the coast, the eastern coast here of North Island. A lot of this is some older activity, but we did see a couple 3s there overnight and some 2s and other smaller earthquakes. A quick glance at the earthquake 3D drums here, or not 3D drums, but drums in general, will give us a good indicator of what's going on here across this region. And I'm not really seeing anything major popping off here. Looks like we did have that 3-pointer down here off the Alpine Fault, South Island, New Zealand area. That is being picked up here across the graph. But far as specifically around I guess it would be this station here. The region that we did see quite a bit of swarming here a couple days back. It looks just like minor earthquake activity here over the last 24 hours. So not a whole lot kicking up. But still, with a deeper movement up north, may want to watch for some further activity, not only down south here, but also further to the west. That could add the pressure and momentum heading that way, right? Over here in the Tonga Trench, Kermadec Trench, the general plate movement does show that west-northwestward movement, and a lot of times we'll follow it along that plate boundary, and that's where that earthquake activity will occur, following deeper movement quakes. Looking at today's activity here, looks like the latest, a 5.1 into the Indonesia area. Low activity here off the coast of New Guinea. These are from yesterday, though it looks like 4.6 and a 5.1. Right, let's see what we got for space weather. Then we'll jump off here and monitor the SoCal earthquake activity here. Nothing, doesn't look like it's, I mean, it's still crackling here with some C flares, but I don't see any M flare activity over the past couple days. It's definitely active, more so than it has been far as the amount of energy, and that's coming off of a sunspot region here that's now starting to turn away from the Earth. That's going to be, here we go, 3288 and 3285, a pretty large cluster here of sunspots. A look at the magnetic structure here still harbors potential of seeing maybe a good M flare with this the close proximity of those magnetic structure and that sunspot. Also up here, this regional sunspot is noteworthy as well. So two main areas to watch. And it looks like even this one here is starting to gain a little bit of development. And further around the bend here on the eastern side of the sun, we are looking at looks like another sunspot region coming in. So we'll watch this one as it rotates in the view in the coming days. These will rotate out further to the west, and we'll see how this plays out. 99% chance for a C flare, M flare at 35. X flare has been elevated to a 5% chance, and good possibility we'll see an M flare at least before these rotate off the view, off the visible disk. Severe weather threat today. Storm Prediction Center looks like most of the activity well east here around the Virginia area and Norfolk in there as well. But for the most part, a little calm area across the south and the southern plains. All right, folks. Again, live stream is up and running. Watching the earthquake swarm in Southern California. The closest station I have to that area is going to be that station right there at the top, Barrett, California. It's Barrett. That is a seismograph station there just to the west of the swarming area. It may not pick up some of the smaller quakes, but definitely pick up those twos or the threes and anything larger. So again, just be prepared, stay safe, in any times of uncertainty, because we don't know if it's, going to trigger the big one or if it's just going to be a swarm and go away like many other swarms in the past. There's been a lot of times where big earthquakes have been kind of picked up, or I don't want to use the word forecast or predicted, but they've been, earthquake swarms have, been prior to big events. We've seen them before. It just, just who knows if it's going to be enough to trigger. Either way, best thing to do is be prepared. It's Sunday. A lot of people at home, take advantage of, maybe making a little earthquake bag or a little tote with some important information in it, or, some food, toiletries, stuff that you may need to grab in a hurry if there's a big earthquake down there. So 8.1 will definitely do some damage in Southern California. Something unlike what we've witnessed so far in our history in Southern California. It's just a matter of time before it goes. We just don't want to get complacent, right? All right, guys, I'll be here for the most of the day. going to stay out of the sun. I'm definitely going to be here in the computer room monitoring this activity. And if anything else pops up here in terms of unusual activity of further swarming, or maybe a new swarm somewhere else in Southern Cal, then I'll pop back on. But for now, that'll be it. We'll catch you guys back here a little bit later tonight. Stay safe, and make sure you guys subscribe here. Click the notification bell so you guys can get notified when a video is put out by YouTube here. We'll catch you guys a little bit later on.